Hello traders, welcome to video 4 of the binaryoptions.net trading video series. We're going to continue looking at support and resistance. In this video we're looking at trend channels and trend lines. Support and resistance. Trends and ranges are determined by how price reacts to support and resistance. So in the last video we looked at a simplistic view of support and resistance. Support is where prices stop falling, or you can think of them as a floor in the price. Resistance is where prices stopped rising previously, and you can think of them as a ceiling. And support and resistance can be either historical, which is what we looked at in the last video. If the price rises, stops at a certain level and then pulls back, we viewed that as resistance. If the price is falling, hits a certain level and bounces, we considered that support. And that's based on historical data. But if we use trend lines and trend channels, we can start to have a more predictive approach of where support and resistance will be in the future. So trend lines help us highlight the trend. They're a visual aid. They could be used as trade triggers, but typically they're just specifically used for analysis type reasons, being able to visually see where the trends are. It's possible to have multiple trend lines in effect. You can have a long-term uptrend and a short-term downtrend going on at the same time. So over the long run the price is moving higher, but on a shorter time frame it might be moving lower. And that would be a pullback in a longer uptrend, and we'll look at a couple examples of that. A trend line in an uptrend connects two swing lows. So the price is gyrating, it's going up, pulling back, going up, and we connect two swing lows to form a trend line. It extends out to the right and is validated if the price comes to it again a third time and then bounces off of it. If you draw it between two and it comes back a third time and just blows right through it, we're not considering that a trend line, because it hasn't been validated, it hasn't shown that the market really cares about it. A trend line in a downtrend connects two swing highs. So the price is moving down, pulls up, moves down again. We can use those highs to draw a line extending out to the right. If the price comes to it a third time, respects it, and continues to drop, that's a valid trend line. A trend can also move in a channel. This is when we have trend lines which connect the highs and the lows, and the price is bouncing between it. We'll look at an example of that. And trend lines often need to be redrawn. They're not magic. They're often need to be redrawn based on price action, because the price will stop just short of it or move a little past it, and that's fine. They're used as visual aids and analysis aids, so we can redraw them, and just because it moved through the trend line a bit doesn't necessarily mean that that's a significant event. Always, you can find more information on binaryoptions.net, lots of trading articles, tutorials, free trading resources, including charts. Now let's get to a few examples. Probably one of the best trends we have going right now is the S&P 500. I have a daily chart of it here. As we can see, there's our first two. If we continue to extend it out to the right, we can see the price has respected this multiple times. Pulls away from it here, trend accelerates, but when it comes back, that's when it tests it a third time, validates our trend, tests it a fourth time, tests it a fifth time, comes back. It penetrated a bit here, but we see the bounce again. A trend channel, as was mentioned, when the price is moving back and forth, we also have an example of that. As we can see, the price after this continued to rally. We can connect here. Didn't quite make it there, but we can see there is a pattern here where the price is moving within this band, so worth it to put on your chart, even though it's not exact levels. It does show this overall pattern moving higher. These can also be used to establish approximate entry areas and target areas. So you can look, if the price slows down around this lower trend line, look to buy in this area, and you can look to sell near this area. I also mentioned that you can have trend lines even in different directions occurring at the same time. So on this daily chart, we have a long-term uptrend, but we know that if we zero in here, in this area here on, let's say, maybe an hourly chart, we are likely to have some downward trend lines. Let's put one in here. Now notice this one. We have this rundown. We can draw a trend line, but this isn't validated yet. It would need to hold here and then continue to drop. So this actually isn't, we can draw it on our chart if it helps us analyze the price action, but once it blows through it on that third try, we know that the long-term trend is likely to resume. Recall, if you look at the daily chart, long-term uptrend. Flip to the hourly chart, and it doesn't respect this line, so we can expect that trend to resume. And once again, this isn't even a valid trend line because it wasn't respected, at least on the third time. So it comes to test it a third time, goes right through. Let's see if we can find some other examples here. Intraday trend lines will have to be redrawn quite often, simply because, especially at a stock market or forex type open, you have a lot of activity at the beginning of the day, and then it typically tends to taper off a bit. So if you drew trend lines in the morning, you can see there it does hold it a third time, but we can see this is a completely different price action here, where we have very sharp movement compared to this where it starts to slow down. Nice trend here. And as I mentioned, these will often have to be redrawn, so if we drew it here, then the price accelerates. We'd maybe look to incorporate that as well. And we're looking for price action as well. We're not just looking at the trend line. If we're watching an uptrend, we want to make sure that the price is making higher highs, higher lows, as was covered in the last support and resistance video. And then in a downtrend, we want to see lower highs, lower lows. So as we can see here, making higher highs, higher lows, and even though it doesn't really respect our trend line anymore, we can still see that this is in an uptrend. Whereas here, once we have this and it breaks this former low, and this was what was covered in the last video when we have a breakthrough historical or prior support. So now we have a potential downtrend, and we can draw a trend line if it helps us. So this one pulled back. It does test it a third time and then move sideways, and that was pretty much the end of the day there. And as we can see, just because it moves sideways for a bit, that trend line is still valid. So we can just move it out. Here, you would have originally drawn it here. We have a little bit of sideways action, so we can just put it out to the end here. Overall, the price is still moving in a downtrend, so that line is valid. So hopefully that clears up a few of your questions about trend lines, trend channels, and stay tuned for more videos as we start to cover more topics in technical analysis and trading. Until then, happy trading.